The good sis, Toni Morrison, once wrote, the very function of racism is distraction. It keeps you from doing your work. It keeps you explaining over and over again your reason for being. We're done explaining. And we're taking this opportunity to rest and set our gaze on the work that we've been called to do. Hey, audacious leaders, welcome to the Leadership Revolt. This is the place for leaders fed up with the status quo to get the strategy and support they need to turn their ideas into impact. If you're new to me, I'm your host, Nkoyo Effiong Lewis, lawyer, futurist, mom, sometimes politician, eager to push the boundaries of what's possible. And we're sitting right at the precipice of what's possible today. So let's dive in. It's not lost on me that I rebranded this podcast. Those of you who've been listening for a while, you know this used to be Nkoyo Unscripted, where I gave you your weekly dose of unfiltered thoughts at the intersection of law, leadership, and learning. And this space will continue to be mostly that. But I want it to be more purposeful and intentional. And so I always want to say, I always tell you guys, I share the journey with you. And so, like many of you, you may have an idea or concepts of a plan. You recall we did a whole episode about that. And it's not entirely fully baked. And for many of us who particularly are Black women in leadership positions, we don't always have the opportunity to just test and tweak to be scientists. As we've seen with this current election and this moment in time, that there is always an expectation of perfection that comes regardless of what hands that we are dealt. There's a lot of commentary about the age-old sentiment and experience of Black women in this country of having to be twice as sharp, twice as everything to get even less than half of the result. And so, we're going to talk a little bit about the election. It's still raw for me, as I imagine that may be for many of you. But it's real, and it's playing in all of our spaces as we are thinking about where we are leading, how we're leading. Many of us are women in leadership anyway, leading change, whether overtly, covertly, whether we hold the title or not. And so I want to make sure that I create space, share some thoughts around those feelings and how this election and the decision that was made overwhelmingly by this country is being reflected and experienced by some who definitely see this as a very clear rebuke of Black women in particular, women progress, people, the Black community, people of color, anyone that has difference, and have to live with the fact that our neighbors, many of whom we will not know, who have voted for a future that maybe is not inclusive for everyone. So we will dive into that, but I really want to talk about why I rebranded, which was something that happened even before we got to this place. But I like to tell people, because a lot of times I coach women, I coach leaders, I consult with organizations, and everyone wants to have the blueprint and every single step figured out on day one. And one of the things that I have found is that clarity comes in the doing. And so I think many of you have maybe followed this journey. When we started this podcast, I really actually wanted it to be titled Sore Loser. It was birthed out of the loss of my second campaign where I ran for state senate and definitely felt a lot of sexism, misogyny, being a woman who decided to run for state legislature. It was interesting that it was fine when I ran for school board. Everyone was cool with that because, women, moms, school, like that's cute. But when I was like, actually, I'm a lawyer and I have all these other skill sets and I have a vision for what the state needs, it got real different for men and women alike. So I really was birthed out of that because I didn't feel like I wanted to just bounce back and be the good, good loser and not be a sore sport. Like I did really feel for a period of time like I wanted to curse the earth. I wanted to take a scorched earth approach and talk about what our political system is and is not, and how so much of what you see is a sham in a lot of these elections. but the name was trademarked, so I had to pivot. And then it was like, well, we'll be disruption proof, you know? And then there were like a million disruption proof things. So I just landed with Nkoyo Speaks because I also wanted a place to be candid, to be authentic, to be whole, to not have to be perfect. And so that was why we really started with this whole unscripted, unpolished, raw intersection of insight. And in the doing of that, in just taking the step, putting out, I think we were at 8 episodes before we made this transition. What became abundantly clear to me in all the work that I have done, from whether it was in the classroom to, you know, representing families and organizations as an attorney, is that I have been consistently pushing against the status quo. And many people are feeling right now the weight of that, the exhaustion of that, of essentially having to be long suffering, to have to be patient, to have to be kind, to have to create allegiances with people that are purely transactional, or as the late great Derek Bell would say, are basically rooted in interest convergence. It's just like our interests happen to intersect, and that's why, and never really always feeling what it feels like or knowing what true solidarity is. And so I had posted earlier this week, you know, that many of us are feeling like the big tent, the big Democratic tent, the big progressive tent collapsed on us, particularly us being Black women. And I'll even throw Black men in there because did nobody else hit 70% or above on this group project. So everybody else failed. As a former teacher, right? Like, y'all hit under that 70. You know, we were looking at C's, D's, lots of F's. Definitely one demographic, straight F on this group project. But it definitely felt like that the big tent that we've been talking about of being inclusive, bringing all these people in, collapsed on us. And I shared it's because people failed to hold their side when it wasn't convenient, when any other issue could come that would give them the opportunity to dip out. And, you know, I wish everybody well, all of us, in what these next 4 years plus will be like. Because I think, you know, there was a little bit of FAFO, and folks are going to find out real soon that we made decisions based on basal needs, short-term needs that may not benefit us in the long term. And unfortunately, all of us will have to suffer that consequence. And many of us, particularly Black women, who tend to be at the bottom of a lot of lists, will probably feel the brunt of that. But I think there's opportunity in this space and time for us to refocus. And so that is what this podcast will talk about today, is the agency that comes with focus. You hear a lot of people talking about how resilient Black people are. Black women were resilient. You'll be able to keep going. But a lot of that resilience has been required. It hasn't been a choice. It has been forced upon us. And so I am always going to lead from a position of making sure that I am equipping you to have agency, power, and resources in your life. You know, you will famously hear me say, I think those closest to the problem are the best suited to solve it, but they often lack the agency, resources, and support to do that. And so that is what the Leadership Revolt is here to do, to provide you with strategies and support to navigate through what it is to lead change. Because just on account of your race and your gender, your leadership is disruptive. And I want us to be comfortable with that. I know I've struggled for a very long time with standing out, with taking up space, with being the sole voice that's speaking against something. And I've often wanted to fit in, to feel like I'm a part of it. You know, I used to laugh when I was in not law school, when I started practicing. I remember playing beer pong because that was like the game that happened. And I was like, this thing is such a dirty, disgusting game. Like, I don't understand. And I'm thinking to myself, like, you went through undergrad at a PWI. You went through law school at a PWI. You never played beer pong. And then you got over here at this big law firm, and it's just like trying to fit in. And now it's like, you know, I don't know if you've never played beer pong. It's absolutely a disgusting game. It's like one ball. They throw it into other balls. It might fall off on the ground. They'll just put it in a cup of water and then throw it. And if you hit the ball into the cup, you drink the beer. I don't even drink beer. So first of all, that was like, why are we doing this? But then you think about the germ, like it just is gross. I don't know. That's a tangent. We'll see if it makes the final cut. But once I realized that there's no hiding on account of who I am, that the fact that I have held any type of position of leadership will always be revolutionary and disruptive, I've started to lean into that a little bit more. And as I said earlier in the opening, right, racism, and I would add sexism, any of these isms keep us distracted from just like doing the work. Instead, I'm trying to qualify, explain to you why I'm qualified, etc. And that's emotionally exhausting. And we are in a season, women, lady leaders, Black women in particular, where we don't have to keep explaining. We ultimately do not. It is very clear that our contributions are demanded, but undervalued and often overlooked. And I think we have to sit with the reality of that for ourselves and decide where we focus our attention. And I love this idea of focus because focus is a very intentional action. It requires you to make a decision. It doesn't place one upon you. So in this season, as we are moving forward in what will be a very turbulent few years, and I hope I'm wrong. I hope this podcast ages poorly and I get called out for being like a total doomsdayer and not anticipating this. But as an attorney who knows that, you know, when people try to talk about taking away federal agencies, federal laws that have often protected people of color, Black people, disabled people, LGBTQIA plus people, like so many people have had to go to the federal government, to the Supreme Court of this nation to ask for rights to be protected. Women, period. I can't full stop. But when we start talking about destabilizing the federal government and sending things back to the states to decide, like our education, like healthcare, like a number of things, it's terrifying because a lot of people were never included. And we literally had to plead our case before the federal government to get any layer or level of protection. And we're already hearing the conversation, right? People saying, should I move? Should I go to blue states? Like what, you know, like where should I go? Where is the opportunity? Where will I be able to rest, to be free? And that's a hard question, and one I've been asking myself as well. And what I would like to offer to you is that in this season, one, the fight that's going to happen, that's going to unravel, perhaps it's not our own to fix. There's a quote out there, or someone was saying that, you know, the lessons that people are going to learn may not be ours. Though we may have to feel and suffer them alongside others, they may not be our lessons to learn. And in that, we have an opportunity to fix our gaze on the things that we want. Will it be easy? No, it won't. I have found that trying to have intentional focus and operating with a dangerous level of clarity means that there will be lots of distractions that come your way. But I think the beautiful part, the opportunity for all of us, is we can determine which of those things that pop up are truly opportunities or obstacles that we ourselves need to overcome, or things that are ultimately distractions. And regardless of what happens over the next few days, months, years, we get the agency to decide. I watched a really fascinating video about manifestation and how, you know, the premise was essentially that we may have manifested this second Trump term because the energy all around was about Trump winning, whether that was people being excited about that or people being terrified about that, but the energy didn't shift to something else. And as I've been learning and studying more about the brain and how all of these things work together, what I'm realizing is that what we feed our mind, body, and soul, we create. That we actually have an incredible ability to create things, but we won't create anything if we don't see it first in our minds. And so we have an opportunity to choose what we fix our attention on. And so in this season, I am encouraging you to focus on the things that bring you joy, focus on the things that continue to foster hope for you, and focus on the places that you have the biggest impact to make and create. Because a lot of things that we're going to encounter are outside of our hands, but our intentional decision about where we focus our attention, where we focus our energy, is 1000% within our control. And so I encourage you to be mindful of what you are consuming on social media, of what you are consuming in terms of what you're reading and listening to on podcasts, news, etc. Because one thing that we are absolutely going to need in this season as leaders is sound body and mind and spirit. And so, as I shared with many of my clients in the emails that I sent today, my goal is to ensure that we are prepared for the fight that is ours to carry, the work that is ours to do. And that means that there is a season of rest that is necessary. Rest is resistance. Hope is resistance. Joy is resistance. We cannot change that 70 something million people looked at the options and decided that a second Trump term was the right one for them for whatever reason. But what we can do is invest in ourselves in this season. I have told you all leadership is an inside job first, that you'll never go further than you have developed yourself. And this will be a season where we need to go further. This will be a season where we need to block out things that don't serve us. This will be a season where we get to decide. We get to decide what we're going to focus on. And I know this probably sounds insane because it's like, Nkoyo, can you imagine the number of issues that are happening? Many of you that listen to this advocate for women and children in some form, and they are absolutely going to be under attack. Many of the rights and privileges, so many things will be challenged in the season, but we get to decide what thing we're going to focus on. And with that focus, we get to put the amount of energy around the work that's necessary and move on. We no longer have to carry the weight of every decision in this country because it's not up to us alone. And the big tent will need to rebuild itself. And that's okay. I want to say that's okay. That's not giving up. That's not taking your ball away. That's not retaliating. That is preserving yourself so that you can continue to fight the fights that matter the most, that you can prioritize yourself and the people and things that are most impactful, that benefit you, and that we as Black women get to have joy. We get to have rest. We get to have peace. We don't have to be involved in the chaos that others have created for themselves. And this is a great opportunity for us to find ways to be more intentional, more mindful about the things that we are choosing to do and who we are building with and for and alongside. And so I don't have a whole lot today. I mean, my unserious, if I were to do an unserious of the week, I mean, it's this election. This whole thing is unserious. It's absolutely unserious. People were so concerned about the economy, choosing someone who all of the experts said would tank the economy. People who are concerned about public education, choosing someone who said they're going to get rid of the DOE. Like, all of it is insane. This whole thing is unserious. I don't even want to get into it because it just actually makes me very angry at how we are here. But it also reminds me of the importance of making sure that people have access and opportunity. I had shared in a panel earlier this week that the future is here. And the big problem that we're feeling right now is that most people don't have access to it. They don't have the technology, they don't have the skill, they don't have the requisite critical thinking, etc. that's necessary. And that's not a diss, that's not a slight on any of these individuals. It's actually a diss and a slight on our government that has allowed the vast majority of its population to enter into the intelligence area without the requisite skills to survive, let alone thrive. And so the unseriousness of the week is this election, is whatever these next 4 years will be. I'm saying it with my chest. Like I said, I hope I'm wrong. I hope y'all come back and be like, girl, see? But if I am not, I do hope that you will be intentional about where you focus your attention over this next few days, weeks, months, years, so that we can get out on the other side in a better position for ourselves. It is true, Black people have always been resilient in this country, have always made something out of nothing. We have ancestors and lineage that have endured far worse than what we may see, and that's not to excuse it. That's not to say it's okay, we're going to be all right. You know, I'm not going to hit you with Bible verses and just be like, listen, this is nothing. It is hugely traumatic. It is hugely disturbing. I just say that to say that at the very bare minimum, you absolutely will survive. And if you are intentional in your focus, you too can thrive as well. And so I encourage you to focus on nurturing your own leadership journey, despite a world that may not recognize your worth. And I invite you to join me inside of the collective. This is where we're going to be growing. I am going to be very intentional about building community, a safe space, a radically inclusive place. So yeah, it's not for everybody, because sometimes opening up for everybody actually means that it no longer becomes the inclusive, brave space for some people. And I'm going to lean into that, because everybody else is. Folks is choosing their own adventure, picking their own sides. And I think that we are due a period of time where we are very mindful of the energy and the values alignment of the people that we engage with. And so I encourage you to look out for that. If you're not already following, if you have not already subscribed, I invite you to subscribe here. The Leadership Revolt will happen. The episodes drop every Sunday at 8 p.m. We also have a newsletter that goes a little bit deeper, has some resources to help you just take your learning to the next level. And again, if you want to work more closely with me and the community that we're building, we have a collective. I can't wait to launch one of the subscriptions that we're building for social impact leaders that's coming in the new year. And I'm telling you, baby, radical clarity, dangerous clarity, intentional focus. I have been trimming the fat. That's why you haven't seen me show up everywhere all the time, because I'm actually also being very intentional about where I spend my energy, who I'm investing in, whose energy I'm allowing to impact my own, so that we can make sure we get to the place that we want to be, to the future and the destiny that we need, and that we can move our organizations and our communities and causes that we serve forward in the way that we would want them to go. So as always, if you have an unserious of the week, if you have something you want to share, please reach out to me. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. Are you going to be intentional with your focus? Like, where are you going to cast your cares in the seasons? Where do you have no more F's to give? Kindly, respectfully, it's a no, period, full stop. And who are you building with in the season? I want to know. So please do share. And with that, thank you for joining the first episode of our rebranded podcast, The Leadership Revolt. Like I said, we are here to help leaders who are disruptive by nature or design or desire have the space and strategy and support they need to lead impactful change and turn those ideas into actual impact. Again, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And very intentionally here, go lead audaciously, and let that audacious leadership be the rest and the focus that you need in this season. Be well.